Historians and archaeologists agree. Waking up in a medieval village would be the most jarring sensory shock a modern person could ever experience. Your favorite historical movies and TV shows have gotten almost everything wrong. The reality of medieval peasant life wasn't just difficult. It was a full-body assault on your senses that would make even the most hardened time traveler question their life choices within minutes. Oh, and if you're enjoying these stories, I'd really appreciate a like or subscribe. Super curious where you're all listening from. So, drop a comment with your location and what time it is there. Always blows my mind how people are falling asleep to this all over the world. All right, let's head back to Western Europe during the Middle Ages. Trust me, it's going to be quite a ride. But first, get comfortable. Seriously, adjust those pillows. Pull up that blanket because where we're going, you're going to want to be cozy. So, congratulations. You just woke up in a medieval village sometime around the 14th century. It's dawn or close to it. You're not in a proper bed. Nothing like your comfy mattress at home. You're lying on a straw-filled sack on the floor of a single-room house. The scratchy straw pokes through the rough fabric and jabs at your skin. The first thing that hits you is the smell, not the pleasant scent of coffee brewing or breakfast cooking that might normally greet you. No, this is different. It's wood smoke, thick and acrid, still hanging in the air from last night's fire that's now just glowing embers in the center of the room. There's no chimney, just a small hole in the thatched roof where some of the smoke escapes. The rest lingers, stinging your eyes and coating the back of your throat. Mixed with the wood smoke is the earthy smell of the people around you. You're not alone. A family of perhaps 8 people all sleep in this one room. There's the sour note of unwashed bodies. Not because medieval people were dirty by choice, but because bathing was a rare luxury. And there's another smell too. Animals. In the corner of the room, separated by nothing more than a flimsy wooden partition, are a few chickens and maybe a pig. You blink, trying to adjust to the dim light filtering through the small, unglazed window openings covered with wooden shutters. The sounds come next. A rooster crows somewhere nearby, joined quickly by others throughout the village. Outside, you hear the lowing of cattle and the bleating of sheep being led to pasture. There's movement in the village already. The creak of a wooden door, the distant clang of metal as the blacksmith begins his day. Voices calling to one another. Inside, the family is stirring. The mother is already up, coaxing the fire back to life with practiced hands, adding small sticks to the embers until flames begin to lick upward. The father stretches and yawns beside you, his joints popping as he rises from the hard floor. Children of various ages are rubbing sleep from their eyes, coughing from the smoke. The day waits for no one, mutters the father as he rises. John, fetch water. Mary, help your mother with the pottage. You realize something surprising. These people didn't sleep through the night the way you're used to. Medieval folk practiced what historians call biphasic sleep. They'd go to bed shortly after sunset, sleep for several hours in what they called first sleep, then wake for an hour or two in the middle of the night. During this wakeful period, they might pray, talk quietly, check on their animals, or even visit neighbors. Then they'd return to their second sleep until dawn. The house itself is simple but sturdy. The walls are made using a technique called wool and daub, a wooden frame filled with a lattice of twigs, the wool, and covered with a mixture of mud, clay, and straw. The daub. It's surprisingly effective insulation, though in winter the single room would still be bitterly cold, except right next to the central hearth. You watch as the mother of the household takes a large, round loaf of dark bread from a wooden box. This isn't the fluffy white bread you might be used to. It's dense, dark, and made from a mixture of rye and barley, what medieval people called maslin bread. The family didn't bake it themselves. They were required by law to use the Lord's oven and pay for the privilege. The eldest daughter is stirring a pot, hanging over the newly kindled fire. Inside is pottage, a thick porridge-like stew that forms the backbone of the medieval peasant diet. It's made from whatever vegetables are in season, perhaps some dried peas or beans, and occasionally small scraps of meat for flavor. The same pot has likely been simmering for days with new ingredients added as needed. Near the fire sits a wooden bucket of ale. Yes, ale, not water. Water from streams and wells was often contaminated, but the brewing process made ale safer to drink. It wasn't very alcoholic, perhaps 1% to 2% by volume, but it provided both hydration and calories. Even children drank it as their primary beverage. "Time to break our fast," says the father, tearing the dark bread into chunks and handing them around. Each person gets a wooden bowl of steaming pottage and a chunk of bread. There are no utensils except a shared knife and a few wooden spoons. Most people eat with their fingers and use the bread to sap up the pottage. The meal is simple but filling. It has to be. The day ahead will involve hours of back-breaking labor in the fields. The family eats quickly with little conversation. Food is fuel, not a social occasion, at least not for an ordinary day. After the quick meal, it's time to head out into the village. You follow the father as he steps through the low doorway of the house. The village is laid out before you, a collection of similar WL and daub houses clustered around a central green. Beyond them lie the vast open fields where everyone works. The morning air is crisp and filled with sounds and smells that would be alien to your modern senses. Livestock being herded to pasture, the clang of the blacksmith's hammer, the creak of the millhay, if the village is lucky enough to have one. Women are gathering at the stream to wash clothes, children are collecting kindling, and men are preparing for a day in the fields. The village isn't arranged in neat rows like a modern subdivision. Houses are clustered somewhat haphazardly, though there's still organization to it. At the center might be a small wooden church, the spiritual and social heart of the community. Nearby could be the manor house where the Lord lives, though in many villages the Lord was an absentee figure who lived elsewhere and visited rarely. As you walk, your feet sink slightly into the muddy earth of what passes for a street. There are no paved roads here, just well-worn dirt paths between buildings. The ground is littered with straw, animal droppings, and the occasional chicken scratching for food. In summer, the paths will be dusty. In spring and fall, muddy, and in winter, potentially frozen and treacherous. All around you, the village is coming to life. You pass a man leading an ox toward the fields. The massive animal plodding patiently alongside him. The ox will pull the heavy wooden plow used to break up the soil before planting. A group of women walk together toward the stream, carrying bundles of clothing to be washed. Children chase each other, somehow finding energy for play even before the day's work begins. What strikes you immediately is that everyone has a role, even young children. A boy no more than 6 carries a stick ready to spend his day chasing birds away from newly planted seeds. Girls of similar age help with younger siblings or learn to spin wool into thread. There is no concept of childhood as a protected time of play and learning. In a medieval village, everyone who can work must contribute. Near one house, you see an elderly woman carefully tending a small garden plot. These kitchen gardens are vital supplements to the peasant diet, growing vegetables, herbs, and perhaps some medicinal plants. Cabbages, onions, garlic, and leeks might grow here along with peas and beans when in season. The social structure of the village becomes clear as you observe interactions. Most peasants were serfs. Not quite slaves, but not free either. They were legally bound to the land they worked and to the lord who owned it. They couldn't leave without permission and owed both labor and a portion of their harvest to the lord. Some villagers, however, were freemen who rented their land and owed rent but not labor. They had more independence and could travel more freely. You might be able to identify them by their slightly better clothing or the fact that they directed others rather than taking direct orders themselves. As the sun climbs higher, the day's work begins in earnest. Men gather tools, wooden plows with iron tips, scythes for cutting grain, hoes for weeding, flails for threshing. Women finish household chores and prepare to join their husbands in the fields or to handle other work like spinning, weaving, or tending animals. You notice that everyone's clothing is simple and practical. Men wear loose tunics that reach to their knees, belted at the waist with long stockings or loose pants underneath. Women wear long linen shifts covered by woolen dresses or tunics, often with an apron to protect the valuable fabric. Everyone's clothing is made from wool or linen in muted colors of brown, gray, or dull green. The bright dyes you might see in movies were expensive and reserved for the wealthy. The fields surrounding the village are divided into strips, rather than the neat squares or rectangles you might expect. Each family works several strips scattered throughout the fields rather than one consolidated plot. This ensures that no one family gets all the best land or all the worst land. It's a surprisingly egalitarian system in many ways. As you watch the villagers move toward the fields, you're struck by the rhythm of it all. Despite the hardship, there's a certain harmony to the way life flows here. Everyone knows their place and their task. The community works together out of necessity. No one could survive alone in this world. The blacksmith has his forge fired up now, and the rhythmic clang of his hammer on iron rings out across the village. He's a crucial figure in village life, crafting and repairing the metal tools that make farming possible. Near his forge, you might see the miller, another important person who grinds the villagers' grain into flour using a water or wind-powered mill. Both men are skilled craftsmen who might have slightly higher status than ordinary field workers. As the morning progresses, you begin to appreciate how tightly bound this community is to the natural world. There are no clocks here. Time is measured by the sun, the church bells, and the changing seasons. Work begins at dawn and ends at dusk, with the rhythm of labor changing with the seasons. Spring is for planting, summer for tending and early harvests, fall for the main harvest, and winter for repairs, indoor work, and planning for the next year's crop. You also notice how precarious life is here. One bad harvest could mean starvation. Illness could strike without warning with no effective medical treatment available. Injury could prevent work, which could mean inability to pay rent or taxes, which could lead to eviction or worse. The medieval peasant lived constantly on the edge of disaster with very little security or safety net. Yet despite this precariousness, or perhaps because of it, there's a strong sense of community. Neighbors help each other with difficult tasks like house raising or harvesting. They share tools and resources when possible. They gather for church services, markets, and the occasional feast day or festival that breaks up the monotony of work. As midday approaches, the sun climbs higher in the sky. The morning coolness gives way to warmth, and workers in the field pause occasionally to wipe sweat from their brows. Soon they'll break for the midday meal, another simple repast of bread, perhaps some cheese if they're fortunate, and more ale to quench their thirst. You've survived your first morning in a medieval village. The sensory assault has begun to fade as your brain adjusts to this new reality. The smells that seemed overwhelming at first have become background notes. The sounds of animals, labor, and human voices form a different but not unpleasant soundtrack to the day. What strikes you most, perhaps, is how embodied this life is, how physically present everyone must be. There's no escaping into digital devices, no zoning out in front of screens. Every person here is fully engaged with their physical environment, using their bodies to work, create, and survive. It's exhausting, but also connecting in a way that modern life rarely achieves. As you follow the peasants toward their midday break, you wonder what the afternoon will bring in this strange, challenging world, so different from your own. The midday sun beats down on your face as you follow the peasants into the vast open fields surrounding the village. This is where the real business of medieval life happens. Farming. Without these fields and the people who work them, no one eats. Not the village priest, not the local lord, not the king himself. Everything depends on what happens here. The fields don't look like modern farms with their neat rows and single crops. Medieval fields are a patchwork of narrow strips. From above, they'd resemble a massive quilt of different colors and textures. This strange pattern has a purpose. It's called the open field system, and it's how medieval people distributed both good and bad land fairly among everyone. Each family works several strips scattered throughout the fields, rather than one continuous plot. This way, no one gets stuck with only poor soil or low-lying, flood-prone areas. It seems inefficient to modernize having to walk between scattered strips. But the fairness outweighs the inconvenience. But here's the most ingenious part that would shock any modern farmer. 1/3 of all this farmland sits completely empty. No crops growing at all, just bare soil. Why waste perfectly good land? You ask a leathery-faced peasant woman walking beside you. She looks at you like you've lost your mind. Fallow field needs rest, same as people. Plant the same field every year, and soon nothing grows. This three-field system is medieval agriculture's greatest innovation. The farmland is divided into three huge sections. One grows winter crops like wheat or rye, planted in the fall and harvested in early summer. Another grows spring crops like barley, oats, or vegetables, planted in spring and harvested in late summer. The third field lies, deliberately unplanted to let the soil recover nutrients. Each year they rotate which field serves, which purpose, what. Waso becomes winter crops. Winter crop fields become spring crops. Spring fields go. This rotation keeps the soil from becoming depleted and helps manage pests and diseases that might otherwise build up in the soil. Now you're standing at the edge of a field being actively worked. A man leads a team of oxen pulling a heavy wooden plow. The plow has an iron tip called a plowshare that cuts into the soil, but the rest is wood. Behind the plow walks another man, occasionally leaning hard on the handles to force the plowshare deeper into tough soil. The oxen strain against their wooden yoke, moving painfully slowly across the field. Plowing a single acre might take an entire day of exhausting work. You watch as a young boy walks alongside, carrying a long stick. His job is to keep the oxen moving in a straight line and to prod them when they slow down. "Move, you stubborn beasts," he calls, giving one ox a gentle tap with his stick. For a boy who can't be more than 10, he handles the massive animals with surprising confidence. Behind the plow team comes a group of people with hoes and rakes, breaking up the larger clouds of earth turned over by the plow. It's back-breaking work, requiring them to bend over for hours at a time. Their hands are calloused and their faces weathered from years under the sun. The fields seem to stretch forever. A single peasant family might farm 20-30 acres of land. Not all their own, of course. Most of it belongs to the Lord, and the peasants owe him both a share of their crops and labor on his personal fields called the domain. What strikes you most is how physical everything is. There's no gasoline, no electricity, no hydraulics, just human and animal muscle power. Every calorie of food produced requires many calories of human effort to grow. The energy equation is brutal and unforgiving. "John, the oxen are drifting," shouts an older man from across the field. The boy with the stick quickly corrects the team's path. This is how knowledge transfers in a world without schools or books, through direct instruction, observation, and practice. The tools they use are simple but effective. Besides the plow, you see people working with wooden hoes reinforced with iron edges, wooden rakes, sieves with long curved blades for cutting grain and flails for threshing, separating grain from stalks. Most tools have wooden handles with small metal components only where absolutely necessary. Metal is expensive and precious. Near the edge of one field, a group of women are weeding by hand, literally crawling along the ground, pulling unwanted plants from among the growing crops. Their fingers move with practiced precision, easily distinguishing valuable plants from weeds. A baby is strapped to one woman's back, sleeping despite the heat and movement. "Marjorie, how fares your mother?" calls one woman to another across the field. "Better today. The fever broke last night," comes the reply. Even while working, information flows through the community. There are no newspapers, no social media, just person-to-person communication that ripples across the village throughout the day. Not all the work happens in the grain fields. In a meadow beyond, a man watches over grazing sheep. Wool from these animals will provide crucial income for the village, as well as material for clothing. Nearby, a woman and 2 children collect wild herbs and berries from the edge of the forest, supplementing the village diet with foraged food. The forest itself is a crucial resource, but it's heavily regulated. Most forests belong to the lord or even the king, and taking wood without permission is a serious crime. Still, villagers have certain rights to gather firewood, food, and let their pigs forage for acorns and roots under the trees. The sound of a distant bell pulls you from your observations. It's coming from the village church, marking the hour of sex around midday. For a moment, all work pauses. Some peasants make the sign of the cross. Others simply take the opportunity to stretch their backs and wipe sweat from their brows. "Time for dinner," says a grey, bearded man, leaning his hoe against a tree. Dinner in medieval Parliament is the midday meal, not the evening one. People begin to gather in small groups, sitting in whatever shade they can find. From rough cloth bags, they pull out their midday provisions. The meal is simple, more of that dark, dense bread you saw at breakfast, perhaps with a bit of cheese or dried meat for those fortunate enough to have it. Some have brought small earthenware jugs of ale to wash it down. You join a family sitting under a gnarled oak tree at the field's edge. The father tears his bread into pieces, handing them to his children before taking any himself. They eat mostly in silence, too tired for much conversation and knowing they must soon return to work. "Will we finish the north field today, father?" asks a boy of perhaps 12. "God willing," the man replies. "If not today, then tomorrow." There's a patient acceptance in his voice. Nature and weather dictate the rhythm of work, not clocks or schedules. Some tasks simply take as long as they take. As they eat, you notice how the family's hands tell the story of their lives. Even the children have calluses and dirt ground into their skin that will never truly wash away. The mother's fingers are permanently stained from years of processing wool and plants for dye. The father's hands are massive and gnarled, shaped by decades of gripping tools. Beyond the fields, you can see other villagers engaged in different types of work. Down by the stream, women beat laundry against rocks, the wet cloth slapping in a syncopated rhythm. Near the edge of the village, wood smoke rises from the blacksmith's forge, and the rhythmic clang of his hammer echoes across the fields. The blacksmith is essential to village life. He makes and repairs the metal parts of farming tools, shoes the oxen and horses, and creates everything from nails to door hinges. His is a position of respect, as his skills can't be easily replaced. Similarly important is the miller who grinds the village grain into flour, using a water-powered mill built on the stream. The miller takes a portion of the flour as payment, a practice that sometimes causes grumbling among the villagers who suspect him of taking more than his fair share. After the brief rest, everyone returns to their labor. The afternoon work has a different quality than the morning's, slower, more measured, conserving energy for the long hours ahead. The sun is at its zenith now, beating down mercilessly. Women have covered their heads with linen cloths for protection, while men sweat freely, their tunics sticking to their backs. Work is communal whenever possible. For tasks like harvesting, the entire village might work together, moving from one family's strips to another so that no crop is lost to bad weather because there weren't enough hands to bring it in quickly. This cooperative aspect of medieval village life stands in stark contrast to modern individualism. Here, survival depends on community. No single family could manage alone. They need the collective knowledge, labor, and support of the entire village. Watch how Thomas sharpens his scythe. A father instructs his son. He has the lightest touch in the village. The boy observes carefully as an older man runs a wet stone along the curved blade in fluid, practiced motions. This is how specialized knowledge transfers through direct demonstration and years of practice. There are no instruction manuals, no YouTube tutorials, just the accumulated wisdom of generations passed down through word and example. The livestock are working as hard as the humans. Oxmen pull plows and carts. Horses, rarer and more expensive than oxen, might be used for faster transportation or by the Lord for riding rather than farm work. Chickens scratch for insects among the gardens, providing both pest control and eggs. Dogs help herd sheep and cattle. Cats hunt rodents that would otherwise devour stored grain. Even the humble pig plays multiple roles. Pigs forage on otherwise inedible foods like acorns and food scraps, converting them into valuable protein. Come winter, a slaughtered pig provides not just meat, but fat for cooking and candles, skin for leather, bones for tools, and various organs for food. Almost nothing goes to waste. A shout from the far side of the field draws your attention. A cart has become stuck in a muddy rut, its wooden wheel buried up to the axle. Immediately, several men drop their own work and hurry over to help. Some dig around the wheel while others put their shoulders to the cart, heaving it free with a collective grunt. There's no expectation of payment. Next time, it could be their cart in need of rescue. This scene illustrates a fundamental truth about medieval village life. Reciprocity underpins everything. Today I help you, tomorrow you help me. No one keeps exact score, but everyone remembers both kindnesses and slights. In a small community where everyone depends on each other, reputation matters enormously. As the afternoon wears on, different work rhythms emerge across the landscape. In one field, a lone man walks methodically, scattering seeds from a cloth bag slung around his neck, planting next season's crop. In another, a family works together to build a rough fence of woven branches to keep animals away from young plants. Near the stream, two women have set up a simple loom between trees and a weaving cloth, their hands moving in practiced patterns while they chat. Cloth production was vital and time-consuming, with the entire process from raising sheep to finished garment taking months of work by many hands. You notice there are few idle moments. Even while walking from one task to another, people's hands stay busy spinning thread, whittling wood, or mending tools. Daylight is too precious to waste, especially in winter when days grow short. The technology may be simple by modern standards, but there's remarkable ingenuity in how medieval people solved problems with limited resources. That watermill harnessing the stream's power to grind grain represents cutting-edge medieval engineering. The village might also have a windmill on a nearby hill, another way to capture natural energy. You pause to watch a woman working at the edge of a field. She's using a disc staff, a stick that holds unspun wool, and a spindle to twist raw fiber into thread. Her fingers move with hypnotic rhythm, drawing out and twisting the fibers while the spindle turns and drops, winding up the finished thread. She can do this while walking, talking, or watching children, a perpetual background task that produces the thread needed for all cloth. This is another reality of medieval life. The constant proximity of wilderness, forests harboring wolves, bears, and wild boar, often stood just beyond the village fields. The boundary between civilization and wilderness was permeable and sometimes dangerous. The men return a short while later, breathing hard but successful. "Got away with nothing," one announces with satisfaction. "The sheep are safe, at least for today." As afternoon begins to soften toward evening, the quality of light changes. The harsh midday sun gives way to a gentler golden glow that makes the fields and village look almost idyllic. Workers straighten their backs more often now, glancing at the sun's position to gauge how much daylight remains. In one corner of the common field, older children who've been helping all day begin a spontaneous game of tag, burning off energy despite hours of labor. Their laughter carries across the fields, a reminder that even in this harsh world, joy finds its moments. Soon people will begin making their way back to the village for the evening meal and whatever tasks remain before darkness falls. But for now, they continue their eternal partnership with the land, coaxing food from soil using little more than wooden tools and their own strength. The fields that stretch around you represent an achievement that's easy to overlook from our modern perspective. These medieval farmers, without scientific understanding of soil chemistry, plant biology, or meteorology, have developed sustainable agricultural systems that can support relatively large populations year after year. Their methods are based on centuries of observation, trial and error, and accumulated wisdom passed down through generations. As the workday begins to wind down, you can't help but feel a newfound respect for these people whose lives are so different from your own. Their existence is harder in many ways, physically demanding, lacking modern comforts, and always vulnerable to forces beyond their control. Yet, there's also a directness to their experience, a connection to land and community that many modern people might envy. The sound of the church bell rings out again, signaling the hour of none, mid-afternoon. Soon it will be time to head back to the village for the final tasks of the day before evening settles in. The afternoon sun casts long shadows as you make your way back toward the village. Workers are beginning to return from the fields, tools slung over shoulders, their pace slower than the morning's eager march. The day's labor shows in their movements. The slight stoop of tired backs, the careful placement of feet worn from hours standing on uneven ground. You take this chance to really look at the village itself. From this distance, it's a cluster of simple buildings surrounded by a patchwork of gardens and animal pens. Smoke rises from several hearth fires drifting lazily in the still air. Unlike the rigid grid pattern of modern towns, this village grew organically over generations, its layout shaped by the land, water sources, and the needs of its people. As you get closer, the village reveals itself more fully. At its heart stands the church, its stone walls and modest tower rising above the surrounding timber-framed houses. The church is likely the only stone building in the entire village, a testament to its importance in medieval life. It's not the grand cathedral you might see in a city, but a simple parish church built by local hands over many years. "The church was here before any of us," says an old man, walking beside you, noticing your gaze. "My grandfather's grandfather helped raise that tower." There's pride in his voice. This building connects him to ancestors long dead and to generations yet unborn. The churchyard surrounding it serves multiple purposes. It's a burial ground, of course, but also a meeting place, a site for markets, and sometimes even a location for games and celebrations. Medieval life doesn't separate the sacred from the everyday. They exist side by side, often in the same space. Near the church, but set slightly apart, stands a larger, better-built house, the manor house. This belongs to the lord who owns the village lands, though he might rarely be present. Instead, his steward or bailiff might occupy it, overseeing the collection of rents and services owed by the villagers. The rest of the buildings cluster around these two centers of power, religious and secular. Most are simple one-room houses like the one you woke up in this morning, built of timber frames with WL and daub walls and thatched roofs. Some larger families might have two-room houses with a slight separation between living and sleeping areas. Watch out. You step aside as a small herd of sheep moves past, guided by a boy with a long stick and a shaggy dog. The animals are being brought in from pasture for the night, headed for a communal pen where they'll be safe from wolves and thieves. Animals are everywhere in the village. Chickens scratch in the dirt between houses. A few goats nibble at weeds growing alongside a fence, and pigs root around the edges of yards. Unlike modern farms where animals might be confined to separate areas, here they're integrated into daily life, often sharing living space with their human owners. What you don't see are many of the features we take for granted in modern settlements. There are no street signs. Everyone knows where everything is in a community this small. There are no street lights. When darkness falls, it falls completely broken, only by the occasional lantern or candle glimpse through shuttered windows. And, most notably, there's no sewage system. Waste disposal is haphazard at best, contributing to the distinct smells of village life. You follow the path toward the center of the village, your feet sinking slightly into the muddy earth. The ground is uneven, rutted by cartwheels and animal hooves, and littered with straw, chicken feathers, and less identifiable debris. In dry weather, dust would rise with every step. In wet weather, mud can become ankle-deep. The sound of rhythmic pounding draws your attention to a small building set slightly apart from the others. This is the blacksmith's forge, and the muscular man working there is hammering a glowing piece of iron on an anvil, shaping it into what looks like a hinge. Sparks fly with each blow, and the heat from the forge is intense, even from several paces away. The blacksmith pauses, wiping sweat from his brow with a forearm. His face and arms are darkened with soot, and small burn scars mark his exposed skin, badges of his dangerous trade. He nods to acknowledge your presence, but doesn't break his rhythm for long. Metal must be worked while hot. The forge itself is a stone hearth with bellows to force air through the fire, raising its temperature high enough to make iron malleable. Tools hang from the walls, hammers of various sizes, tongs for handling hot metal, chisels, punches, and files. Each represents hours of skilled work to create, and many were likely made by the blacksmith himself. This man's skills make him essential to village life. He makes and repairs the metal parts of farming tools, creates nails and hinges for buildings, fashions horseshoes, and produces countless other items that keep the village functioning. His position comes with status. He's likely better fed than most, and might even own his workshop rather than renting it from the lord. Near the forge stands another crucial building, the mill. This one is powered by the small stream that runs alongside the village, its large wooden wheel turning slowly in the current. Inside, massive stone wheels grind grain into flour, the staff of life in medieval Europe. Like the blacksmith, the miller holds a position of both importance and some suspicion. Everyone needs their grain ground, but the miller takes a portion as payment, and there's always grumbling about whether he takes more than his fair share. The fine dust of flour covers everything inside and around the mill, and the air here smells of grain and the slightly sweet scent of mill flour. Beyond these specialized buildings, you notice other important elements of village infrastructure. There's a well in the center of what passes for a village square, a crucial source of water for drinking and cooking. Women gather here with wooden buckets, not just to collect water, but to exchange news and gossip. It's an informal information network as vital as the water itself. Near the edge of the village stands a communal oven, a solid structure with a large brick or stone chamber for baking. Few families had ovens in their homes, as they were expensive to build and required significant fuel to heat. Instead, villagers brought their bread dough to this communal oven, paying the baker a small fee or portion of the finished bread. "Hot bread coming out," calls a stout woman, opening the oven door with a long wooden paddle. The scent of fresh bread wafts out, momentarily overpowering the usual village smells. People gather around with cloths to collect their loaves, carefully marked to identify each family's bread. The village has other communal spaces too. There might be a brew house where ale is made, a dairy where milk is processed into cheese and butter, and workshops for specialized crafts like pottery or weaving. These spaces represent shared knowledge and resources. Another way medieval people maximized limited means. As you continue walking, you come across a group of children playing in the dirt beside one house. They fashioned crude dolls from sticks and scraps of cloth and are engrossed in an imaginary world of their own making. Unlike modern children, they have few toys, and those they have are homemade or simple objects repurposed for play. What strikes you is how little adult supervision these children have. Once past infancy, children in medieval villages had significant freedom to roam and play, interrupted only by the chores and work expected of them. By age 7 or 8, they would already be contributing significantly to household labor. And by 12 or 13, they would work almost as adults. Education as we know it doesn't exist for most of these children. Some might learn basic prayers in Latin from the parish priest, but reading and writing are skills few peasants possess or need. Instead, education is practical. Boys learn farming, animal husbandry, and perhaps a craft from their fathers. Girls learn household management, food preservation, textile production, and childcare from their mothers. Master Thomas. Master Thomas. A small boy runs up to an older man walking nearby. My father asks if you will look at our cow. She's not eating and seems in pain. The man nods gravely. I'll come after vespers. This is the village's animal doctor. Not a trained veterinarian, but someone with experience and knowledge passed down through generations. He might use herbal remedies, practical techniques, and perhaps a dose of prayer to treat ailing livestock. Similar knowledge extends to human ailments, typically in the hands of wise women who serve as midwives and healers. Medieval medicine blends practical observation, herbal knowledge, and religious belief. Illness might be treated with a pus of medicinal herbs, but also with prayers to a saint associated with that particular ailment. The line between medicine, folk wisdom, and spiritual practice is blurry at best. Speaking of spiritual matters, the church bell rings out, calling villagers to evening prayers. Many pause in their activities, making the sign of the cross. Some will attend the service, while others continue with necessary tasks, perhaps murmuring prayers as they work. The church dominates not just the physical landscape, but the rhythm of days and seasons. Its bells mark the hours of prayer throughout the day. Matins at dawn, lauds at sunrise, prime tour sext at midday, none in mid-afternoon, vespers at sunset, and compline before bed. Most villages won't attend all these services, but the bells structure their day nonetheless. The church calendar also orders the year with feast days and holy days, providing welcome breaks from work and opportunities for community celebration. Easter, Christmas, and dozens of saints' days create a rhythm of fasting and feasting, work and rest throughout the seasons. As evening approaches, activity in the village intensifies rather than winding down. This is a crucial time for tasks that couldn't be done during the heat of the day or while working in the fields. Women tend vegetable gardens beside their homes. Men repair tools or work on projects like making a new table or mending a door. Older children collect eggs from nesting hens or bring in firewood for the night's cooking. The village has a different feel now than it did at dawn. There's still purpose in everyone's movements, but also more conversation, more moments of rest between tasks. People stop to chat between houses, sharing news or comparing notes on the day's work. You pass a house where a woman sits outside the door spinning wool into thread using a drop spindle. The simple tool, essentially a weighted stick, turns rapidly as she draws out fibers from the mass of wool held on a staff called a disc staff. Her fingers move with practiced precision, creating thread of remarkable evenness despite the crude tools. Nearby, another woman works a vertical loom leaned against the outside wall of her house, the evening light still good enough for this detailed work. The threads click and snap as she passes the shuttle through, gradually creating a fabric that will eventually become clothing, blankets, or other necessities. Textiles were one of the most time-consuming aspects of medieval life. From raising sheep to finished garment involved countless hours of work, shearing, washing, carding, spinning, weaving, cutting, and sewing. Mostly done by women in addition to their other responsibilities. The smell of cooking begins to fill the air as families prepare the evening meal. This is typically the main meal of the day, though still simple by modern standards. The base will be more pottage, that ever-present stew, perhaps enriched with whatever vegetables are in season, and if the family is fortunate, a small amount of meat or fat for flavor. The lords eat better than we do, comments an old woman sitting on a stool outside her door, noticing your interest in the cooking. Roasted meats and white bread, wines and spices from distant lands. But our food fills the belly well enough. She's right about the class differences in diet. The nobility and wealthy merchants enjoy a vastly different cuisine from peasants. More meat, more variety, more imported luxuries like sugar and exotic spices. Even their bread is different. Fine white loaves made from sifted wheat flour rather than the coarse, dark bread of the common people. As dusk approaches, cows return from pasture, lowing softly as they are guided to their nighttime enclosures. Some might be brought into the homes themselves, particularly in colder months when their body heat helps warm the single room. The valuable animals also need protection from thieves and predators. A peasant family that loses its cow loses a critical source of food and income. Chickens roost for the night, finding perches in trees, on fences, or in simple coo. Pigs settle into muddy wallows or crude shelters. Dogs, both working animals and companions, curl up near doorways or fire pits, still alert to unusual sounds or movements even as they rest. The village prepares for night, a time of vulnerability in a world without reliable artificial light. Shutters are closed over window openings. Doors are barred, not with locks, which are expensive and rare, but with simple wooden bars across the inside. Fires are banked to provide some heat through the night, while minimizing the risk of spreading to the highly flammable thatched roofs. Fire is perhaps the greatest physical danger to a medieval village. With buildings made primarily of wood, straw, and dried mud, and with open flames used for cooking, heating, and light, a single careless moment could lead to disaster. Village laws often include strict regulations about fire safety, with heavy penalties for those who endanger the community through negligence. But there are other dangers too. Disease that can spread rapidly through closely packed dwellings. With poor sanitation, threats from wild animals or human outlaws, and always the specter of famine if crops fail or armies pillage the stored food. Medieval villages live with a level of precariousness that modern people rarely experience. Yet, despite these challenges, or perhaps because of them, the sense of community is palpable. As darkness falls, you notice small groups gathering in the last light. Men sit on logs outside a house, discussing the weather and crop prospects while whittling or mending nets. Women work together to process vegetables for storage, their hands busy even as they talk and laugh. These evening gatherings serve multiple purposes. They're social occasions, certainly, but also opportunities to share labor, exchange information, and reinforce the bonds that help the community survive. Stories are told, songs are sung, problems are solved collectively. In a world without books, television, or internet, human interaction is the primary source of both entertainment and information. The church bell tolls again, marking the end of another day in this medieval village. One by one, families retreat into their homes for the evening meal, and then, not long after, to sleep. With darkness comes an almost complete halt to activity. Candles and rushlights are too expensive to burn for long, and the next day's work will begin with the dawn. As night settles fully over the village, the stars emerge in a sky untainted by light pollution. The Milky Way stretches in a brilliant band overhead. And without modern distractions, the people here know the night sky intimately. They can track the seasons by the stars' positions and tell time by the moon's path. Tomorrow will bring another day much like this one. The eternal cycle of agricultural life, punctuated by church festivals, seasonal changes, and the occasional extraordinary event like a wedding, birth, or death. For now, the village sleeps, gathering strength for the work to come. Night has fallen over the medieval village. The vast blanket of stars above seems to hang just beyond the reach of your fingertips, so bright and numerous they cast faint shadows on the ground. Without electric lights to compete, the night sky puts on a show few modern people ever witness. The Milky Way stretches in a luminous band from horizon to horizon, and shooting stars scratch brief lines across the heavens. But you're not outside to stargaze. You've joined a family in their one-room home for the evening. Sitting on a rough wooden bench pulled up to the central hearth, the fire provides the only light, casting flickering shadows that dance on the dubule and daub walls. The smoke rises toward the hole in the thatched roof, though plenty lingers, stinging your eyes slightly. "Move closer to the fire, friend," says the father of the household, noticing you rubbing your arms against the evening chill. Night air carries sickness. Medieval people held strong beliefs about health that mixed practical observation with superstition. Night air was indeed considered dangerous, not entirely without reason, as malaria, literally bad air, and other diseases seemed to strike more often after sunset. They didn't understand about mosquitoes being more active at night, but they noticed the pattern. The family has finished their evening meal, another round of pottage, somewhat thicker than breakfast's version, and containing bits of salted pork for flavor. They've also had more of the coarse bread and perhaps some cheese or eggs. The wooden bowls have been wiped clean with the last pieces of bread, then stacked on a shelf until morning. Now comes one of the few periods of leisure in the medieval day. With too little light for most work, these evening hours before sleep are for family storytelling and simple handicrafts that can be done by feel or in dim light. The mother sits on a low stool, her fingers working a drop spindle, even in near darkness. The motions so familiar, she needs little visual guidance. Two small children play quietly with carved wooden animals in the corner. The oldest son whittles a piece of wood, carefully shaping it into what might become a spoon or ladle. "Tell us about the wolf hunt, father," says one of the children, looking up from his play. The man smiles, setting aside the leather strap he's been mending again. "You've heard it 3 times already. Please." The child's eyes reflect the firelight as he waits expectantly. "Very well." The father settles back, and everyone, even the mother, with her spinning, seems to pause slightly to listen. It was the coldest winter anyone could remember. Snow piled higher than a man's head, and the wolves grew bold with hunger. Storytelling was crucial entertainment in medieval villages. With no books, radio, or screens, the spoken word carried history, practical knowledge, religious instruction, and entertainment. Stories passed down through generations preserved cultural memory and values while providing much-needed distraction from the hardships of daily life. The father's tale is part history, part exaggeration told with the practiced cadence of a story shared many times. He describes how 10 winters ago, a pack of wolves threatened the village livestock, and how the men organized a hunt that tracked the alpha wolf to its den. His hands gesture dramatically as he describes the final confrontation, acting out the motions of the spear thrust that finally brought down the beast. "And its pelt still keeps our feet warm in winter," he concludes, pointing to a worn wolf's skin used as a rug near the bedding area. The children sigh with satisfaction, having gotten exactly what they wanted from a tale they already know by heart. Medieval entertainment wasn't about novelty. Familiar stories repeated with slight variations provided comfort and reinforced shared values and identity. "Or sing for us," Mother asks the daughter, and without much coaxing, the woman begins a simple melody, her voice clear but quiet. The song tells of springtime and young love, of flowers blooming and birds returning from their winter journey. It's a song of hope during the darker seasons, a reminder that winter always gives way to spring. Such music was another vital form of entertainment. Songs accompanied work in the fields, religious celebrations, and quiet family evenings like this one. They preserved history, told stories, shared wisdom, and simply brought beauty into lives often marked by hardship. Most were passed down orally, with regional variations developing over time. As the mother sings, the father takes up a simple wooden pipe, a recorder-like instrument with finger holes that can produce a range of notes. He plays a gentle harmony to her melody, the music filling the small space with warmth that seems to push back against the night's chill. Not every family had musical instruments, but many created simple ones. Pipes carved from elder branches, drums made from stretched animal skins, stringed instruments fashioned from gourds or wood. Music making wasn't reserved for specialists. It belonged to everyone as both personal expression and community building. When the song ends, the family sits in comfortable silence for a moment. Then the father yawns and stretches. "Time for prayers before sleep," he says, and everyone kneels facing the small wooden cross fixed to the eastern wall. The family recites the Lord's Prayer in Latin, the words memorized through repetition rather than reading. Few peasants could read Latin or understand it fully, but the familiar rhythms of these prayers connected them to their faith and to Christians throughout Europe who spoke the same words each night. After prayers, preparations for sleep begin. The fire is banked, carefully covered with ashes to keep the coals alive until morning without risking a house fire. Water is brought in from the rain barrel outside and covered to keep dust and insects out. The door is barred with a wooden plank that fits into brackets on either side. The family doesn't undress fully for bed as modern people would. They might remove outer layers or belts, but most sleep in the same linen undergarments they've worn all day. Changing clothes daily wasn't practical when most people owned only one or two complete outfits. The sleeping arrangements are communal by necessity. The parents and youngest children share the single raised platform bed, little more than wooden planks covered with a straw-filled mattress and woolen blankets. Older children and any guests or relatives sleep on straw pallets laid directly on the earthen floor. Privacy, as we understand it, wasn't a concept in medieval peasant homes. The single room served all functions: cooking, eating, working, socializing, and sleeping. Even intimate moments between husband and wife might occur with only the thinnest pretense of privacy. Perhaps a blanket hung temporarily as a divider while children pretended to sleep. Before the last light is extinguished, a simple oil lamp with a floating wick, the mother checks on the smallest child, tucking the blanket more securely around her. The gesture of maternal care transcends time, identical to what a mother might do today. A reminder of how much remains constant in human experience despite vast differences in material circumstances. "Sleep well," murmurs the father as the lamp is pinched out. Dawn comes early. Darkness envelops the house completely. Without any artificial light sources, the night is profoundly black, broken only by the dull red glow of banked coals in the hearth. The sounds change too. The settling of the wooden structure as temperature drops, the soft breathing of sleeping children, occasional rustling of animals in their corner of the room, and from outside the hoot of an owl hunting in the fields. Not everyone in the village retires so early, though. In some homes, particularly during winter, when nights are long, neighbors might gather for communal activities that are easier done in groups. Women might bring their spinning or weaving, working together by the light of a shared fire while sharing gossip and songs. Men might repair fishing nets or carve tools, sharing the light and warmth while discussing crops or village politics. These gatherings served practical purposes beyond sharing resources. They reinforced community bonds, distributed knowledge, settled minor disputes informally, and provided crucial social support. In a world without phones or internet, face-to-face interaction was the only way to maintain the social networks everyone depended on for survival. Some evenings brought special entertainments. A traveling minstrel might arrive, bringing news from distant places along with music and stories. Such visitors were rare treats in isolated villages, greeted with excitement and rewarded with food, drink, and perhaps a few precious coins for their performances. Village celebrations marked important transitions in both the agricultural and religious calendars. The completion of harvest might bring a feast day where even the poorest families contributed something to a communal meal. Religious festivals combined sacred observations with much-needed opportunities for relaxation, dancing, and sometimes courtship between young people from neighboring villages. Weddings were major community events, often scheduled for after harvest when food was most plentiful. The entire village would participate, contributing food, music and manual labor to preparations. Such celebrations might last for days, providing a welcome break from routine and cementing relationships between families who would depend on each other through hardship and prosperity alike. On ordinary evenings, though, darkness brought the day's activities to a natural close. Without artificial lighting, most work became impractical or dangerous after sunset. Sleep patterns aligned more closely with natural light cycles, with most people going to bed soon after dark and rising with the dawn. This doesn't mean medieval people slept a solid 8 hours through the night. Historical evidence suggests they practiced what's called biphasic sleep, sleeping for several hours after sunset. First sleep, then waking for an hour or two around midnight before returning to second sleep until dawn. During this midnight waking period, people might pray, talk quietly with bedmates, tend the fire, check on animals, or even visit neighbors. Some medical texts from the period suggest this midnight hour was considered ideal for conception, being a time of restfulness and peace. The pattern of first and second sleep wasn't viewed as insomnia or a sleep disorder. It was the normal rhythm of human rest before artificial lighting extended waking hours deep into the night. Some sleep researchers believe this biphasic pattern might actually be more natural for humans than the consolidated 8-hour sleep modern people strive for. As you lie on your straw pallet in the dark house, listening to the soft breathing of the family around you, you might find yourself drifting into this ancient sleep pattern. The physical labor of the day has left your body tired in a way modern workouts rarely achieve. A deep, honest fatigue that makes the simple bedding feel luxurious. The smell of wood smoke hangs in the air, along with the earthy scent of the thatched roof and the faint animal odor from the household's livestock. It's not unpleasant once you've grown accustomed to it, simply the normal background scent of medieval life. As unremarkable to the villagers as the smell of cleaning products or air fresheners might be in a modern home. Outside the village has its own nighttime soundscape. An occasional dog barks, alerting to a fox or badger prowling near livestock pens. Wind rustles through thatched roofs and shifts the branches of ancient oaks standing sentinel at the village edge. From the direction of the stream comes the steady rhythm of the watermill operating even at night when the flow is strong enough. These sounds have a pattern and meaning to villagers that might escape a modern visitor. The mill's rhythm tells them water levels are good, promising efficient grinding of tomorrow's grain. The pattern of animal sounds indicates no unusual threats prowling the village edges. The wind direction carries information about tomorrow's weather that might determine which tasks take priority at dawn. The medieval relationship with night was complex. Darkness brought real dangers from accidents in an environment without lighting to predators, both animal and human, that exploited the cover of night. Spiritual fears also intensified after sunset with beliefs in supernatural creatures and forces that held sway in darkness. Yet night also brought its gifts. Rest from labor, family togetherness, and a sky ablaze with stars that served both practical and spiritual purposes. The stars helped mark seasons and even hours, while also inspiring awe that connected people to religious and philosophical traditions stretching back millennia. Medieval villagers had detailed knowledge of celestial patterns gained through generations of observation. They knew which stars heralded planting time, which constellations warned of coming winter, and how to use the night sky as a natural calendar and clock. This knowledge wasn't written in books, but passed through direct instruction and experience. The night also offered solitude rare in daytime village life. A person stepping outside briefly might experience one of the few truly private moments available. A chance for reflection, personal prayer, or simply breathing space away from the constant company of others. Such moments helped balance the intensely communal nature of medieval existence. For those awake during the deepest part of night, midwives attending births, monks rising for midnight prayers, or villagers during their midnight waking hour, the world took on different qualities. Sounds carried farther in the still air. Familiar paths became mysterious landscapes navigated by touch and memory. Time itself seemed to flow differently. In this darkened house, surrounded by the sleeping family, you feel a connection to countless generations who found rest in similar circumstances. Despite the vast technological differences between their world and yours, the human experience of night, with its vulnerability, its mystery, and its renewal, remains fundamentally unchanged. Sleep comes easily after the physical demands of a medieval day. Your thoughts slow as your body settles into the simple bedding. The last sounds you register are the soft crackling of banked embers and the deep, steady breathing of people who will rise before dawn to begin another day of tending fields, animals, and each other in their carefully balanced world. As your consciousness drifts towards sleep, you carry with you a new appreciation for these medieval lives, harder than yours in countless material ways, yet rich in direct experience and community connection that many modern people find themselves craving. The medieval village sleeps now under its canopy of stars, the same stars that will shine over it tomorrow night and for centuries to come. In the stillness before dreams take hold, there's comfort in that continuity, a thread connecting your temporary visit to the ongoing story of human lives lived in rhythm with land and sky, season, and community. Dreams come easily on your straw pallet. The physical exhaustion of a day in medieval life settles deep in your muscles, a kind of tiredness modern gym workouts rarely achieve. This is the honest fatigue that comes from using your body as the primary tool for survival. The darkness is complete, wrapped around the sleeping household like a thick blanket. When you wake, it's not yet dawn. The house is dark except for the faint red glow of the banked fire. Someone has risen in the night to add a small log, keeping the precious embers alive until morning. You hear soft breathing from the sleeping family around you. This midnight waking would be perfectly normal to medieval people. The father of the household sits up on his straw mattress. He doesn't seem surprised to see you awake too. "The midnight hour," he whispers, careful not to disturb the others. A good time for thinking. Medieval people called this period between their first and second sleep the watch. It was a treasured time for prayer, quiet conversation, or simple reflection. In winter, when darkness stretched for 14 hours or more, this midnight waking provided a natural break in the long night. "I think about the seasons ahead," the man says, poking gently at the fire. "Spring planting isn't far now. The church bells will ring for Candlemas soon, halfway between winter solstice and spring equinox." His words reveal how medieval people marked time, not by abstract months on a calendar, but by the natural cycle of seasons punctuated by church festivals. Their year followed an ancient rhythm, the solstices and equinoxes marking the sun's journey with cross-quarter days between them, creating 8 segments to the year. Each transition brought its own traditions, tasks, and expectations. Candlemas in early February marked the first stirrings of spring preparation. Across Europe, peasants would begin checking their plows, sorting seeds, and watching for signs of warming earth. The exact timing varied by region. What worked in southern France wouldn't apply in northern England, so local knowledge passed down through generations was crucial. "The old ones say to watch the elder bushes," the man continues. "When their buds swell, it's time to prepare the field edges. My father taught me that, and his father before him." This generational knowledge kept communities alive through centuries of change. Without books or formal education, practical wisdom had to transfer directly from person to person. Children learned by watching, helping, and gradually taking on more responsibility until they mastered complex skills. The conversation drifts into comfortable silence. Outside, an owl hoots. Then another answers from farther away. Eventually, the man yawns and settles back onto his mattress. "Sleep well," he murmurs. "The second sleep is always the sweetest." You drift back to sleep, pulled down by the deep quiet that only comes in a world without electrical hum or distant traffic. This time your dreams are filled with medieval images, fields of swaying grain, church bells marking the hours, hands working wool into thread with practiced motions. When you wake again, pre-dawn light filters weakly through the cracks around the door and the smoke hole in the roof. The family is already stirring. The mother kneels at the hearth, coaxing yesterday's embers into new flames. Children roll up their sleeping pallets. The day begins again, as it has thousands of times before in this ancient rhythm. But today, you notice something different in the quality of light, in the sounds coming from outside. There's a subtle shift in the air, a barely perceptible softening. You've slept through the final weeks of winter, and the first whispers of spring have arrived in the medieval world. "Feel that?" asks the mother, noticing your expression as you step outside with a wooden bucket to fetch water from the rain barrel. The turning of the year, still cold, but different. She's right, though frost still crunches underfoot. The morning bird song has changed. New voices have joined the chorus, migrants returning from southern wintering grounds. The village looks the same, but there's a different energy as people move between tasks with slightly more vigor in their steps. In medieval, people were exquisitely attuned to these seasonal transitions. Their survival depended on reading subtle signs in nature and responding appropriately. Plant too early, and frost kills the seedlings. Delay too long, and the growing season becomes too short for crops to mature. Each decision carries weight when your food supply for the year depends on it. At the edge of the village, men are examining their plows, checking wooden beams for cracks and iron shares for wear. They discuss repairs needed before the earth is soft enough to break. Women sort through stored seeds, testing for viability by nibbling on grains to check if they're still firm and alive inside. The rhythms of agricultural life governed everything in the medieval village. Each season brought its distinct labors, pleasures, and challenges. Spring meant plowing and planting. Summer brought weeding and early harvests. Autumn was the main harvest time, and winter focused on processing crops, repairing tools, and indoor work like spinning and weaving. These seasonal patterns created a life that flowed in cycles rather than the linear progression modern people often experience. The medieval peasant didn't think about advancing in life the way we might. Success meant maintaining balance, having enough food to last until next harvest, keeping healthy livestock, raising children who would continue working the land. "Come see," calls a child, tugging at your sleeve. She leads you to a sunny spot beside a cottage wall where tiny green shoots have pushed through the soil. "The first spring onions," Mother says, "we can add them to our pottage tonight." The child's excitement over these small green sprouts makes perfect sense in context. After months of stored foods and limited options, the first fresh greens of spring were precious. They provided vital nutrients missing from winter diets and signaled the end of the hungry gap, that dangerous period when last year's stores ran low before new crops were ready. Everywhere in the village, you see preparations for the seasonal shift. Men clean out animal pens, spreading the valuable manure on fields to enrich the soil. Women air out winter bedding and clothing, hanging woolen items in the spring sunshine to discourage moths and refresh fibers. Older children clear drainage ditches to handle the spring rains, while younger ones collect kindling from the forest edge. The village works together with minimal discussion. Everyone knows their role in this ancient choreography of survival. What strikes you is how integrated everything is. Nothing exists in isolation. The livestock provide manure for fields which grow grain for humans and animals alike. Wood ash from fires becomes potch fertilizer. Even human waste gets repurposed into the agricultural system. This circular economy wasn't driven by environmental ideology, but by necessity and practicality. In a world where nothing could be easily replaced or purchased, everything had value. Medieval villagers were masters of reuse, repair, and recycling out of sheer need. By midday, you find yourself helping a group of women prepare vegetable beds near their cottages. These kitchen gardens supplemented the main field crops with vegetables, herbs, and medicinal plants. The women chat as they work, hands moving with practiced efficiency. "My grandmother swore by planting by the moon," says an older woman, breaking up soil clouds with a wooden tool. root vegetables when the moon wanes, leafy plants when it waxes. The others nod in agreement. Medieval agriculture blended practical observation with folkloric elements and spiritual beliefs. The phases of the moon, positions of stars, and religious calendar all influenced when certain tasks were performed. Some of these traditions had practical foundations. Others were simply ways to organize time and maintain cultural identity. As you dig alongside them, you realize how physically connected these people are to their food supply. Every calorie that enters their bodies has been touched by their hands multiple times. Sowing, tending, harvesting, processing, cooking. There's an intimacy with sustenance that modern people rarely experience. The priest says, "We'll bless the plows this Sunday," mentions a younger woman. Then the men can begin turning the earth if the weather holds. The blessing of tools and seeds was another way medieval Christianity integrated with agricultural life. Religious observances didn't exist separately from daily work. They sanctified and structured it. Planting began with prayer. Harvests ended with thanksgiving, and the cycles of nature were seen as reflections of divine order. As afternoon stretches toward evening, you wander toward the village edge where several men are working on a shared project. They're repairing the simple wooden bridge that crosses the stream, replacing worn planks and reinforcing supports weakened by winter floods. This kind of commons maintenance happened regularly, with all able-bodied villages expected to contribute to projects benefiting the entire community. Roads, bridges, the village well, and defensive structures all required collective upkeep. Labor was the tax everyone paid for community membership. "Hold this steady," directs an older man, positioning a wooden beam. You step in to help, feeling the rough timber under your hands. The wood still holds the winter chill, but the men's exertions have them sweating despite the cool air. They work with quiet efficiency, each understanding their role without need for constant direction. What they're building isn't beautiful by modern standards, just functional logs and planks fitted together with simple joinery and wooden pegs. But it will serve its purpose reliably for years until the next round of repairs. Medieval infrastructure wasn't built for permanence, but for maintainability with limited resources. As the light begins to soften toward evening, the church bell rings out, calling people to Vespers, the sunset prayer service. Some villagers set aside their work immediately and head toward the small stone church. Others continue with urgent tasks, perhaps murmuring prayers as they work. The bell marks time, but doesn't command universal obedience. Practical needs sometimes take precedence even in this deeply religious society. You follow those going to the church, ducking your head to enter through the low stone doorway. Inside, the space is simple but peaceful. Shadows gather in the corners, while the last sunlight filters through small high windows. There's no glass, just wooden shutters that can be closed against bad weather. The walls bear simple paintings depicting Bible stories and saints. These images served as books for the illiterate, teaching religious narratives to people who couldn't read. The colors are earthy and faded, made from local minerals, plants, and binding agents like egg yolk. Villagers stand or kneel on the packed earth floor. There are no pews in this humble parish church. The priest, scarcely more educated than his flock, but set apart by his role, leads Latin prayers in a sing-song voice. Few understand the words, but everyone knows when to respond with Amen or make the sign of the cross. The brief service ends as daylight fades completely. People file out, exchanging quiet greetings or making plans to help neighbors with tomorrow's tasks. The village settles into evening mode. Fires are built up for the night's cooking. Animals are secured in pens or brought indoors. Children are called in from play. Tonight's meal seems slightly more substantial than yesterday's. The pottage has more ingredients. Those early spring onions the child showed you, dried peas saved from last year, and a small amount of precious salt pork for flavor. There's also a surprise. A basket of eggs shared by a neighbor whose hens have begun laying more with the lengthening days. The wheel turns, says the father, breaking an egg into the wooden bowl where his wife is mixing dough for flatbread. hungry winter giving way to season of plenty. His simple statement captures the medieval worldview. Life as a wheel, rather than a line, turning through seasons that always return. There was comfort in this cyclical understanding. Bad times would pass, good times would come again, and the community would endure through these natural fluctuations. After the evening meal, as darkness settles completely over the village, activities turn inward. By firelight, the family works on small projects, mending clothing, carving a wooden spoon, repairing a broken tool. Their hands stay busy while conversation flows, punctuated by yawns as the day's labor makes itself felt. The father tells a story about the village's founding generations ago. It's part history, part legend, impossible to separate fact from embellishment after centuries of oral retelling. But the story serves its purpose, connecting this family to those who came before them, reinforcing their sense of belonging to this specific place. This connection to place and lineage anchored medieval identity in ways modern people might envy. Most villagers lived their entire lives within a few miles of their birthplace. They knew every tree, every slope of land, every seasonal change in their small territory with profound intimacy. Their ancestors lay buried in the churchyard. Their descendants would work the same fields. The deep roots created resilience. Medieval villages endured warfare, plague, famine, and political upheaval that would destroy less grounded communities. When disaster struck, people rebuilt because they couldn't imagine being anywhere else. Their identity was inseparable from their location and their relationship to the land. As the evening grows later, conversation dwindles. The mother banks the fire for the night, carefully preserving embers for morning. The family kneels for evening prayers, simple words of gratitude for the day's sustenance and protection through the coming night. Then they settle onto their sleeping pallets, arrangements the same as the previous night. "Sleep well," murmurs the mother. "Tomorrow we begin turning the earth." Her words hold both literal and metaphorical meaning. The physical turning of soil prepares it for new growth. But the turning she speaks of is also the greater turning of the seasonal wheel. The community moving collectively from winter's inward focus to spring's outward expansion. As you lie on your simple bed, you reflect on what you've witnessed in this medieval village. The hardships are undeniable. Physical labor that would exhaust modern bodies, limited diets, vulnerability to disease and weather, lack of privacy or personal autonomy. Yet, there's also a coherence to this life that seems increasingly rare in modern times. These villagers experience direct connection to their food, their community, their environment. They understand the systems that support them because they can see and touch every component. Their work has immediate, tangible results. Their social bonds are reinforced daily through shared labor and mutual dependence. The medieval worldview offered something increasingly elusive in modern life: integration. Sacred and secular weren't separate spheres, but aspects of a unified existence. Work and rest followed natural rhythms rather than arbitrary schedules. Production and consumption happened in the same space, often by the same hands. Of course, romanticizing medieval village life would be a mistake. The precariousness, lack of medical care, limited personal freedom, and restricted opportunities created genuine suffering. Few modern people would willingly trade their lives for the material conditions of a 14th century peasant. Yet, as you drift towards sleep on your straw pallet, warmed by the banked fire and the breathing of the family around you, you wonder if there might be wisdom to recover from this ancient way of living. Perhaps the medieval village has something to teach about sustainable use of resources, about community resilience, about living within natural cycles. The owl calls outside, a low, haunting sound that seems to echo across centuries. The medieval night wraps around the sleeping village. The same darkness experienced by countless generations before and after. In this timeless moment between wakefulness and dreams, the distance between past and present feels paper-thin. Your breathing slows, matching the rhythm of the sleeping household. The straw beneath you no longer feels strange, but comforting in its simple functionality. Your muscles relax, heavy with the memory of honest work performed alongside others. The smoky scent of the banked fire becomes a familiar comfort rather than an irritant. Sleep approaches not as an escape, but as a natural continuation of the day's cycle. Another turning of the great wheel that governs all life in this medieval world. Your thoughts grow slower, dreamier, drifting between observations and reflections without urgency or direction. In these final moments of consciousness, you carry with you images that will persist beyond this journey through time. Hands working soil that has nourished generations. Children learning ancient skills through watchful imitation. A community moving through seasons with the grace that comes from deep tradition and shared purpose. The medieval village sleeps now as it has for hundreds of years before and will for hundreds more. Its lessons about harmony with natural cycles, about the wisdom of limits, about the strength found in community interdependence remain available to those who seek them. As you finally surrender to sleep, there's comfort in knowing these patterns endure somewhere in our collective memory, waiting to be rediscovered when needed. And with that thought, you drift into dreams carried on the timeless current that flows between past and present, between waking and sleeping, between what was and what might be again. And with that, close your eyes and drift off to sleep,